bring is the truth, nothing more.
Hot day, something had to give, and this was it. 265,000 lightning strikes peppered the southeast, none more spectacular than this. Queensland's tallest building proved a towering lightning rod. This was the view from inside. Smoke from the Q1 had emergency crews responding. The effects were felt from the Gold Coast to Bribie.
We're pulling everyone off stage until the storm passes through.
And here's why. The rock concert at Sandstone Point Hotel was battered by the maelstrom. The closing act was cancelled. In Goodna, a jacaranda tree that survived 3 floods finally couldn't stand anymore.
I guess a danger waiting to happen, and that's exactly what did happen when a car drove straight into the tree which had fallen across the road.
The SES got more than 200 calls for help from people like Julie Shoesmith.
It was like a freight train just sort of come over the house.
Half her roof is torn away.
One huge gust, that's just one gust of wind, blew the whole roof off, but then, as the water came in, the roof collapsed.
Julie only finished renovating this room last weekend. Now she has to start all over again, and the roof will need replacing. It ended up next door.
The Polynesian kingdom of Tonga in the South Pacific is getting hammered by tropical cyclone Gita. The storm is the equivalent of a Category 4, bringing destructive winds, torrential rain, and storm surge flooding. And it could turn out to be the strongest tropical cyclone to hit the area in decades. Now, the storm's eye wall is over Tonga's largest islands. Now, Tonga comprises 170 islands, most of them uninhabited, but some are home to beach resorts as well as plantations. States of emergency have been declared. The kingdom's acting prime minister has done that. A state of emergency also declared in American Samoa, northeast of Tonga. There's already been widespread damage in American Samoa. The emergency declarations are intended to give people time to trim trees, secure furniture, and make other preparations before heading to evacuation centers.
The southeastern city of Pohang was hit early this morning by a 4.6 magnitude earthquake, resulting in injuries and damages to facilities. The Korea Meteorological Administration said the tremor is believed to be an aftershock of the 5.4 magnitude quake that hit Pohang 3 months ago, making it the strongest aftershock yet. The quake struck at 5:03 a.m. about 5 kilometers northwest of Pohang, but was reportedly felt as far away as Seoul, with some 1,400 calls coming in to fire stations. 2 people have been hospitalized, while at least 20 people have returned to their homes after receiving medical treatment in nearby hospitals. Emergency services in Pohang are checking buildings throughout the city, with some 30 cases of damage reported so far. The operators of a nearby steel mill, a nuclear waste depository, and the nation's nuclear power plant say their facilities have not been affected. Since this morning's quake, at least 7 aftershocks over 2.0 magnitude have been detected.
People on their way to work through the city this morning were greeted with a confronting sight. Several pigeons, some dead, others in obvious distress, were found on the ground after a suspected mass poisoning. The incident in Forest Chase has prompted widespread anger, and a warning pictures in this report may be upsetting.
Whether you consider them vermin or not, nobody wants to see pigeons like this.
It was really horrible. It's not a nice thing to see.
Fiona Edgerton was walking through Forest Chase this morning when she saw several birds in distress.
Some of them look like they're actually starting to have seizures.
It's believed up to a dozen pigeons were killed. No one's certain if it was a deliberate baiting program or an accidental poisoning.
They have no less right than us to be here, and they're not really doing that much harm.
Emma Maddell and Jessica Williams were so upset when they saw this footage on Facebook, they came to the city hoping to help.
Take them somewhere where they could get either, put out their misery sooner or helped if that's possible.
After receiving several messages online accusing it of being responsible for the deaths, the City of Perth was forced to respond saying that it wasn't, but it did send its rangers out to collect the dead bodies. The RSPCA isn't investigating, but says if anyone has proof the birds were baited, it wants to know about it.
Ready, Bill?
Cool.
Believe it or not, these mosquitoes are the good guys. Scientists in Florida hope they'll help reduce the population of disease-carrying mosquitoes. The lab-bred sterile males have been infected with a bacteria that, while not harmful to humans, will keep their baby mosquitoes from growing to maturity.
So we're releasing many thousands of sterile males, or I should say effectively sterile males. Those matings, when they take place, none of the progeny survive.
Between now and the end of July, we're going to release about 2/3 of a billion male mosquitoes. Count them.
That's a lot of bugs, but if it helps reduce Zika and other diseases, it'll have been worth it.
Parents gather outside a Miami Catholic school to demand answers. This after the school fired a popular first-grade teacher. The school called the decision difficult and necessary. The school fired Jocelyn Morphy just days after she married her longtime partner, who's also a woman. Morphy taught at St. Peter and Paul Catholic School for 7 years. Many parents first learned of the decision through a letter from the school.
I'm upset. I'm upset. The way they handled this was unbelievable.
The Archdiocese of Miami says she broke the contract she signed when she began teaching at a Catholic school. ABC News reports 4 other teachers from that school got a verbal warning from the school for attending the ceremony.
A new children's movie is getting...
CBS 4 News Health Alert to tell you about the flu epidemic is suspected of causing 2 more deaths, including a 5-year-old from New York and a 24-year-old from Las Vegas. Just last week, deaths from influenza and pneumonia were responsible for about 1 of every 10 deaths in this country. CBS News medical correspondent Dr. Tara Narula has more.
She's fine. She's doing everything she needed to do, was going to work. We're getting ready for a family cruise.
Early last week, Sabrina Clark began experiencing flu-like symptoms, according to her husband, Steve.
She came down, woke me up in the morning and said she thinks she needs to go to the hospital because she's been coughing up blood all night.
Clark says doctors in Utah diagnosed the normally healthy mother of 2 with influenza B and strep throat. He says she died last Tuesday. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which monitors the influenza virus, says the rate of flu-related hospitalizations is approaching the highest amount on record. Several more weeks of increased flu activity could continue before the epidemic begins to subside, says the CDC's acting director, Dr. Ann Schuchat.
If things continue like they are right now, we will have even more hospitalizations this year.
To help stop people from getting sick, researchers from Columbia University are recommending hospitals use special ultraviolet light panels. The lamps can kill the virus while still remaining safe around people. At Washington Regional Medical Center in Arkansas, UV robots are already being used to sterilize patient rooms.
It's an added layer of protection for our patients to ensure that they have the safest place they can come.
London City Airport will be closed all day, inconveniencing 16,000 travellers after a World War II bomb was found on the site. The bomb was found in the River Thames near the George V dock, and bomb disposal experts are now studying the device before attempting to defuse it. A large safety perimeter has been set up.
Billionaire industrialist George Soros has defended his decision to fight Brexit. Soros has put his money where his mouth is and donated more than £7,000 to anti-Brexit groups. The businessman has been blasted in the UK press and told to butt out of British politics. In his defence, he says the referendum on membership was a fatal error egged on by unscrupulous agitators. He says Britain outside Europe will lose much of its global influence and will suffer because 45 years of successful integration will go into reverse. The 87-year-old said Brexiteers did not win the referendum with a decisive enough majority. Mr. Soros was said to be so angry at the criticism, he's considering a further six-figure donation.
After a weekend of Korean Olympic diplomacy, some potential shifting to ease the tensions here. Yes, Vice President Pence in that interview saying that talks between North and South Korea, even between the North and the U.S., could be possible following, he says, that he got assurances from South Korean President Moon that pressure would be maintained on North Korea to rid it of nukes and missiles. This follows a virtual love fest between Moon and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister. They were together 4 different times this weekend, including at a concert Sunday night. She extended that invitation to Moon to come to Pyongyang for a summit. Remember, the vice president had a close but a cool encounter with Kim Yo-chung at Friday night's opening ceremony of the Games. Athletes from the North are participating with those from the South. Sunday night also finally saw a protest against the South's efforts to turn these games into the Peace Olympics. It was small, but it was symbolic of many here who are cautious about getting too close to the North. Now, Sandra, our own experts are saying a possible shift on talks from the vice president would be important, but we're already seeing other Trump administration officials qualifying it.
Well, here in Washington, now that Congress has finished its budget deal to keep the government running for the next 2 years, the president is submitting his own budget today. It includes funding for his border wall and a program to repair America's roads and bridges. At the same time, the Senate is taking up the difficult issue of immigration. Amber Strong brings us that story.
With a budget deal under wraps, it's on to the next one for Congress and President Trump. On the list, immigration. The president says he needs 3 things to make it work.
Fully securing the border, ending chain migration, and canceling the visa lottery.
In exchange, the administration's proposal offers a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million of the so-called Dreamers, the illegal immigrants brought to the U.S. as children. But Trump says if his conditions aren't met, no deals. Meanwhile, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is keeping his end of the bargain.
I want to thank the Democratic leader.
And in a rare move, will begin an open-ended debate over immigration today.
I do think that we can get something done this week.
Senator Jeff Flake is one of a handful of lawmakers working on an immigration proposal. He's hopeful a Senate plan could come as early as this week and be good enough for the conservative House and the president.
By definition, if we can get something with support of 65 to 70 senators or maybe more, it's going to be a good, broad bill.
On the other side of Washington, the president will unveil his plan to tackle infrastructure.
As we rebuild our industries, it is also time to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure.
Trump promised to fix America's roads and highways, but at a price tag of $1.5 trillion. The plan calls for $200 billion in federal money over the next decade. According to an administration official, that funding will come from cuts to other programs. That leaves more than $1 trillion for the states and private sectors to cover on their own.
The UK's Foreign Secretary came to see the situation with his own eyes. Boris Johnson toured Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh and met with villagers who remain in Myanmar's Rakhine state. He thinks Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi does not fully understand the crisis.
I don't think she's been up in a helicopter to see what we have seen today. I don't think it has come through to her the full extent, the horror of what has happened.
The horror Johnson is talking about is what the U.S. calls ethnic cleansing, and the UN says it may be genocide. 700,000 Muslim Rohingya have fled to Bangladesh in a mass exodus since August. That's when the military of the Buddhist majority country began its latest crackdown. The Rohingya accused the Myanmar army of mass killings, rape, and the torching of their villages.
So, you mean you say they burned their own villages?
Yes. They tortured. And after the 25th August terrorist attack, most of the villages were burned out.
Myanmar says its military operations were a counter-offensive to attacks by armed Rohingya. It's not known how many people have died in these operations since August, but Doctors Without Borders estimates at least 6,700 Rohingya were murdered in the first month of violence.
I've seen nothing like it in my life. Hundreds of villages torched. It's absolutely devastating, and I think that what is needed now is some leadership, some calm, but some leadership working with the UN agencies.
Johnson is calling on Myanmar to work with the UN and repatriate the refugees back to Rakhine State, but under UN supervision. Myanmar has so far blocked UN investigators from the region, and a high-ranking US diplomat recently quit an advisory board saying he feared the panel would whitewash the crisis. New reports and photos of mass graves are increasing international pressure on Suu Kyi and her government.
I believe she can still make a change and make a difference, but to do that, she needs to surely get the agencies in, get the refugees back home in a way that is safe and voluntary and dignified.
What remains to be seen is if Suu Kyi can live up to her 1991 Nobel Peace Prize and put a stop to the humanitarian and human rights crisis that continue.